Picture this. You're 8 months pregnant, making your husband's favorite blueberry pancakes when your best friend calls with 4 words that shatter your world. Don't look at page 6, but it's too late. The photo is already burned into your mind. Your billionaire husband kissing a bikini model on his yacht while you're home alone, preparing for the birth of your first child after years of fertility struggles. But here's where this story takes a turn no one saw coming. That Instagram model, she's not just a mistress, she's married to a Russian oligarch. And those $18 million your husband invested in her modeling agency? They're now funding an international criminal empire that's about to make you and your unborn baby their next targets. What started as a simple affair becomes a web of espionage, money laundering, and murder that reaches the highest levels of government. Victoria Hamilton thought she was just dealing with an unfaithful husband. She had no idea she was about to uncover a conspiracy that would put her in witness protection and force her to give birth while hiding from killers. This is the story of how one woman's world collapsed in a single morning, and how she fought back to build something even stronger from the ashes. The coffee mug slipped from Victoria Hamilton's fingers. It shattered against the marble floor of their $30 million penthouse, sending ceramic shards across the kitchen like tiny white daggers. "Tori, don't look at page 6, please. I'm coming over right now." But Maggie's frantic voice on the phone was too late. The photograph was already burned into Tori's retinas. Her husband Richard, Rick to everyone who mattered, kissing a stunning blonde in a barely there bikini on his yacht. The caption underneath read, "Baby bump blues, billionaire trades pregnant wife for Instagram model." 8 months pregnant, Tori stared at her phone screen until the image blurred. 23 years together, 15 married. Their first child finally on the way after years of fertility struggles that had consumed their relationship like a slow-burning fire. The pancakes she'd been making, Rick's favorite blueberry ones, started smoking on the stove. The acrid smell filled the kitchen, but Tori couldn't move. She stood frozen, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other clutching her phone with white knuckles. Her wedding ring caught the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 14 carats of emerald-cut perfection that Rick had surprised her with on their 10th anniversary. An upgrade, he'd called it, kissing her forehead, "because you deserve the best." The irony tasted bitter in her mouth now. The elevator chimed in the foyer. Maggie's voice echoed through the penthouse before her footsteps appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I tried to kill the story, but..." "How long?" Tori's voice sounded foreign to her own ears. Hollow, empty. Maggie Cooper had been Tori's best friend since college. 29 years old, an investigative journalist for the New York Post, with a reputation for breaking stories that mattered. Her dark hair was still messy from sleep, and she wore yesterday's clothes with her press badge dangling from her neck. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "How long have you known Maggie?" The photos surfaced 3 hours ago. Maggie's voice was careful, measured. "But Tori..." She took a deep breath. "There are more." The baby kicked hard against Tori's ribs, as if responding to the tension crackling through the air. She pressed her hand to the spot, feeling the firm pressure of a tiny foot or elbow. This little person inside her had no idea that her world was crumbling before she'd even taken her first breath. "More photos?" "More of everything." Maggie approached slowly, like she was dealing with a wounded animal. "Different locations, different dates. This isn't a one-time mistake, Tori." The words hit like physical blows. Tori sank into one of the kitchen island stools, suddenly grateful for the support. The marble was cool against her palms as she gripped the edge. "Where is he now?" "According to his assistant, he's on a business trip in Miami. Has been for 3 days." Miami, where the photographs were taken, where her husband of 15 years was playing house with a woman young enough to be his daughter, while Tori attended prenatal appointments alone. "What's her name?" Maggie pulled out her phone, scrolling through notes with the efficiency of someone who'd been working this story for hours. "Scarlett Kane, 26 years old, Instagram model with 2 million followers. Originally from Cleveland, but she's been living in New York for the past 2 years. 26. Tori had been 26 when she'd met Rick at a corporate law conference. Young, ambitious, completely swept off her feet by the charming tech entrepreneur who was already worth $50 million in climbing. Now she was 32, pregnant, and apparently disposable. Does she know about the baby? I don't know. Maggie's honesty was brutal but necessary. But Tori, there's something else. Something that doesn't add up about this girl. Before Maggie could elaborate, the elevator chimed again. Rick's voice carried through the penthouse, casual and confident as always. Tori, I'm home early. We need to talk. The sound of his footsteps on the hardwood floors made Tori's stomach clench. She looked at Maggie, who was already gathering the printed photos from the counter where she'd spread them like evidence at a crime scene. Rick appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing the Tom Ford suit Tori had bought him for their 15th wedding anniversary, still tan from his business trip, his silver hair perfectly styled. At 45, he was what Fortune magazine had called Tech's Silver Fox. Distinguished, powerful, attractive in the way that money and success made men attractive. His gray eyes took in the scene, the shattered coffee mug, the smoking pancakes, Maggie's guilty expression, and finally Tori's tear-stained face. This isn't what it looks like, he said. The audacity stole Tori's breath. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of those 6 words. Really? Her voice was steadier than she felt, steadier than she had any right to be. Because it looks like my husband of 15 years has been screwing a woman young enough to be his daughter while I carry his child. Rick's jaw tightened. A muscle in his cheek twitched the way it did when he was angry or cornered. You're being dramatic, Tori. Dramatic. She repeated the word slowly, tasting its shape. Our baby is due in 4 weeks, Rick. 4 weeks. And you've been planning your exit strategy for... She looked at Maggie. 3 months, Maggie supplied quietly. The earliest photos I found date back 3 months. 3 months. Tori's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. I was showing at 3 months. You were taking me to those awful prenatal classes where they made us practice breathing exercises. You held my hand through the glucose test. You painted the nursery. The marriage has been over for years, Tori. We both know it. The cruelty in his voice was like a slap, sharp and sudden and designed to hurt. I didn't know it. Apparently, I was the only one who didn't know it. Rick ran his hands through his silver hair, a gesture she'd once found endearing. Now it just looked practiced, calculated. You've been so focused on getting pregnant, on treatments and schedules and ovulation windows. When was the last time we actually talked? About anything other than hormone levels and doctor's appointments? Each word was a knife twist, because there was truth in the accusation, and that made it worse. The fertility struggles had consumed them. Month after month of hope and disappointment, of carefully timed intimacy that had nothing to do with passion and everything to do with biology. So you decided to console yourself with a child? Scarlett understands me. She's vibrant, alive. She's 26. Age is just a number, Tori. No, Rick. Prison sentences have numbers. Bank accounts have numbers. Ages have meaning. She was in high school when we got married. The elevator chimed again, and Eleanor Hamilton swept into the kitchen like an avenging angel in Chanel. Rick's mother was 68 years old, with steel gray hair and the kind of old money elegance that could freeze blood at 20 paces. She'd never quite approved of Tori, not because she disliked her, but because she'd never thought anyone was quite good enough for her son. Richard. Eleanor's voice could have cut glass. Explain this mess. For the first time since he'd walked into the kitchen, Rick looked uncomfortable. Mother, this is between Tori and me. Nothing is between you and anyone when it appears on the front page of every gossip rag in Manhattan. Eleanor's eyes swept over the printed photos Maggie was holding. Who is this girl? Her name is Scarlett Kane, Maggie said, unable to help herself. And she's married. The silence that followed could have shattered crystal. Married? Rick's face went white beneath his tan. Maggie pulled out her phone, scrolling through research notes with the practiced efficiency of an investigative journalist who'd been working this story since 3 in the morning. Scarlett Kane, born Stephanie Kowalski in Cleveland, Ohio, married Dmitry Volkov in a private ceremony in Monaco 18 months ago. Eleanor's perfectly plucked eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. Volkov, as in the Russian oligarch? The same one. Worth an estimated $12 billion, currently under investigation by several international agencies for money laundering through shell companies. Rick dropped into one of the kitchen stools as if his legs had given out. For the first time in their marriage, Tori saw him looking genuinely vulnerable. Stupid. Used. She never mentioned being married. Shocking, Tori said, surprised by the venom in her own voice. A woman who sleeps with married men might not be completely honest. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Tori pressed her hand to the spot. This child growing inside her didn't deserve any of this chaos. She deserved a family that wasn't imploding before she'd even drawn her first breath. Eleanor's phone rang, the sharp trill cutting through the tension. She glanced at the screen and frowned. James Morrison, our attorney. Without asking permission, she answered on speaker. James? Eleanor, we have a problem. James Morrison's voice was tight with stress. He'd been the Hamilton family attorney for 20 years, handling everything from business contracts to estate planning. The SEC just called. They're opening an inquiry into Hamilton Technology's overseas investments. Something about suspicious fund transfers. Rick's face went from white to green. What kind of transfers? The kind that coincidentally line up with your relationship timeline with Miss Kane. Rick, what the hell have you been doing? Tori felt the world shift beneath her feet. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about money, federal crimes, her unborn child's future hanging in the balance of decisions she'd never been part of making. James, she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. This is Tori. I need you to recommend a divorce attorney, today. Tori, please, Rick started. Today, James. I'll have 3 names for you within the hour, James replied without hesitation. And Tori, get your own financial advisor, immediately. After Eleanor hung up, the kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic 20 floors below. Tori found herself focusing on these ordinary sounds, anchoring herself to reality while her world spun out of control. How much money are we talking about? She asked. Rick wouldn't meet her eyes. It's complicated. Uncomplicated. Maggie was taking notes, her journalist instincts overriding the awkwardness of witnessing her best friend's marriage implode. Rick, the photos show you on yachts, in private jets, at expensive resorts. That's not Hamilton Technology's money, is it? Some of it is. Rick's voice was barely above a whisper. I thought I was investing in Scarlett's modeling agency. She said she wanted to become independent, to build something of her own. Tori laughed, but there was no humor in it. You thought you were rescuing her. She said Volkov was controlling, dangerous, that she'd made a mistake marrying him for his money, and she wanted out. So you decided to be her white knight. I know how it sounds now, but it sounds like you destroyed our family because a pretty girl told you she needed saving. Eleanor, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. How much money, Richard? Rick's shoulders sagged. 18 million so far. The number hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. $18 million. More money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes, moved from their accounts to fund his midlife crisis. So far? Tori's voice was deadly quiet. She needed more for the final stages of establishing the agency. I was going to transfer another $50 million next week. $68 million total. Maggie's voice was flat with disbelief. Rick, you were about to give a woman you've known for 3 months $68 million. It was an investment. It was a con, Eleanor interrupted, and you fell for it completely. Tori stood up slowly, her hand braced against the small of her back, where the baby's weight had been causing her pain for weeks. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, watching tiny figures move along the paths below. Normal people living normal lives where billionaire husbands didn't transfer millions to Russian oligarchs through their mistresses. Where is she now? Tori asked without turning around. Miami, Rick said. At least that's where she was yesterday. With Volkov? I don't know. She said he was in Europe on business. Maggie looked up from her notes. Volkov's yacht left Miami this morning. Coast Guard records show it's heading toward international waters. How do you know that? Rick asked. Because unlike you, I actually investigate the people I'm interested in before I give them millions of dollars. The baby kicked again, and Tori gasped as sharp pain radiated across her belly. Too much stress, too much adrenaline. She needed to calm down for the baby's sake. But how do you calm down when your entire life was revealed to be a lie? Tori? Rick was on his feet, moving toward her. Are you okay? Don't. She held up a hand to stop him. Don't touch me. Don't pretend to care about this baby when you've spent the last 3 months planning to abandon her. That's not true. I never planned. You moved $18 million to your girlfriend's account. You were about to move 50 million more. When exactly were you planning to tell me? Before or after the baby was born? Rick's silence was answer enough. Tori turned back to the window, watching a young couple pushing a stroller along one of the park paths. They looked happy, carefree, everything she'd thought she and Rick would be once their daughter was born. I trusted you, she said quietly. Through all the miscarriages, all the failed treatments, all the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if we'd ever have a family. I trusted you. You can still trust me. This thing with Scarlett, it's over. I'll call her right now and end it. It's not over, Rick. It's never going to be over. Because every time I look at our daughter, I'm going to remember that you were ready to leave us for a woman who was lying to you from the very beginning. She turned around to face him and was surprised by how small he looked. This man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals, reduced to a scared boy who'd been caught in a lie. She's going to ask about you someday, our daughter. She's going to want to know what kind of man her father is. And I'm going to have to figure out how to explain that her father chose a con artist over his family. The elevator chimed again. This time it was Tori's sister Nina, looking frazzled and out of breath. At 35, Nina Rodriguez was 2 years younger than Tori, but had always been the practical one. She ran a successful art gallery in San Francisco and had never liked Rick. Too smooth, she'd said at their wedding. Too perfect. I came as soon as I saw the news, Nina said, taking in the scene. What can I do? Help me pack, Tori said. I'm going to stay at grandmother's house in Connecticut until the baby comes. You don't have to leave, Rick said. This is your home. This was our home, past tense. Tori headed toward the elevator, her sister falling into step beside her. Have your lawyer call mine, Rick. We have a lot to discuss. As the elevator doors closed, Tori caught a glimpse of Rick standing in the kitchen, surrounded by the debris of their marriage. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. Then she remembered the photographs and the feeling passed. In the silence of the elevator, Nina squeezed her hand. You're doing the right thing. Am I? I'm 8 months pregnant. My husband is under federal investigation, and I'm about to be a single mother. Nothing about this feels right. But you're not staying with someone who betrayed you? That part is right. The elevator reached the penthouse's private garage, where Tori's Mercedes waited. As Nina helped her into the passenger seat, Tori felt something she hadn't experienced in months of fertility treatments and careful pregnancy management. The terrifying freedom of not knowing what came next. But for the first time in hours, the baby was calm. 3 days later, Tori sat in the office of Patricia Wells, Manhattan's most feared divorce attorney. Patricia's reputation preceded her like a storm front. She'd secured Jennifer Gates $73 million in her divorce, and she never lost. The office overlooked Madison Avenue, all glass and steel and intimidating leather furniture, designed to make opposing counsel nervous. Patricia herself was 50-something, silver-haired and sharp as a blade in her black Armani suit. Mrs. Hamilton, your husband's assets are... Patricia paused, studying the financial documents spread across her glass desk. Complicated. Hamilton Technologies stock. Real estate portfolios spanning 3 continents. Offshore investments that made Tori's head spin just looking at the numbers. All of it built during their marriage, which meant half of it was legally hers. The good news is New York is an equitable distribution state. The bad news is determining what constitutes marital assets when your husband may have been manipulated into moving money offshore. You think Scarlett targeted him specifically? I think beautiful young women don't accidentally meet billionaire husbands on yachts, especially when those women are married to Russian oligarchs under federal investigation. Tori's phone buzzed. Text message from Maggie. Urgent. Found something big. Meet me at your doctor's appointment. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's office in the Upper East Side had always felt like a sanctuary. The walls were covered with sonogram photos from grateful patients, soft music played in the background, and everything smelled like the lavender diffuser Dr. Mitchell kept on her desk. It was a place dedicated to new life and hope. Everything Rick's betrayal had tainted. "How are we feeling today, Tori?" Dr. Mitchell asked, but her eyes showed concern that went beyond medical. At 40, Dr. Mitchell had been Tori's OB/GYN for 3 years, guiding her through the fertility struggles and finally the successful pregnancy. She had warm brown eyes and gentle hands, and she'd been one of the few people who never made Tori feel broken during the months of failed treatments. Physically fine, emotionally destroyed. "I saw the news. I'm so sorry." Maggie arrived during the ultrasound, clutching a manila folder against her chest. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was, oh my God, is that the baby?" On the ultrasound screen, their daughter moved and stretched. Perfect tiny hands, delicate features, a profile that looked remarkably like Tori's baby pictures. At 36 weeks, she was almost fully developed, just putting on weight and waiting for her entrance into a world that had become infinitely more complicated since the last appointment. "She's beautiful," Dr. Mitchell said softly. "Heart rate is perfect. Position is good. Due date still looking solid for 3 weeks from now." Tori stared at the screen, feeling the familiar surge of fierce love mixed with terror. This little person would be depending on her completely. No partner to share the 3 a.m. feedings, or the worry or the overwhelming responsibility of raising a human being. "Everything looks perfect, which is remarkable considering the stress you've been under," Dr. Mitchell continued. "But I want you to try to stay calm. High stress levels can trigger preterm labor." Stay calm. While her husband was under federal investigation and her marriage was imploding in the national media. Tori almost laughed at the impossibility of it. After the appointment, Maggie pulled her aside in the waiting room. "I found the connection. Dmitry Volkov doesn't just launder money. He targets wealthy Americans through honey traps. Scarlett isn't his wife in any real sense. She's his employee." The folder contained surveillance photos, financial records, a web of deception that made Tori's head spin. Photos of Scarlett with other men, wealthy men, all of them married. Rick isn't her first mark. There were 3 others in the past 5 years. All wealthy, all married, all ended up losing significant assets in offshore investments that disappeared. So she's a professional con artist. She's a weapon. And Rick walked straight into the trap. Tori studied the photos. Scarlett laughing with a tech CEO from Silicon Valley. Scarlett on a yacht with a pharmaceutical executive from Boston. Scarlett at a charity gala with a hedge fund manager from Chicago. All of them older, all of them successful, all of them looking at her with the same besotted expression Rick had worn in the Miami photos. How much did the others lose? Between 20 and 40 million each. But Rick, Maggie flipped to another document. Rick was different. He was the biggest target they'd ever attempted. Because he has more money? Because he was vulnerable. Recent fertility struggles, marriage under strain, ego bruised from years of trying to have a baby. He was perfect for their operation. The words hit like a physical blow. Tori had to sit down in one of the waiting room chairs, her hand pressed to her belly where the baby was moving restlessly. "They researched us, our marriage, our problems, everything. For months before Scarlett ever approached him, they knew exactly which buttons to push." Tori thought about the fights she and Rick had been having before the pregnancy finally took. The tension around every doctor's appointment, every failed month, every well-meaning question from friends and family about when they were going to have children. She'd been so focused on getting pregnant that she'd missed her husband becoming a target. Where is she now? That's the thing. She disappeared yesterday. The yacht that left Miami? It went to the Bahamas, but Scarlett wasn't on it. She flew to New York on a private jet registered to one of Volkov's shell companies. She's here? In the city? Gets worse. She checked into the Carlisle Hotel, same hotel where Rick has been staying since you kicked him out. The betrayal felt fresh all over again. Even now, even after everything, he was still with her. Tori's phone rang, Rick's name on the screen. "Answer it," Maggie said. "Put it on speaker." "What do you want, Rick?" To apologize, to explain. His voice sounded hollow, tired. Tori, I've made terrible mistakes, but I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? Just emotional cheating? Just financial fraud? Help me understand the acceptable level of betrayal. Silence stretched between them. The SEC seized my passport today, he said finally. Good. The word surprised Tori with its viciousness. They're saying I moved $18 million to accounts controlled by Volkov's organization. But I thought I was investing in Scarlett's modeling agency. I thought I was helping her become independent. You thought you were rescuing her. She said she needed to escape, that Volkov was controlling, dangerous, that she'd made a mistake marrying him for money and wanted out. So you decided to be her white knight? I know how it sounds now. It sounds like you destroyed our family because a pretty girl told you she needed saving. Tori, there's something else. Something you need to know. The line went quiet except for the sound of Rick's breathing. What now? Scarlett isn't who I thought she was. I found out about Volkov yesterday, about the other men. I confronted her, and she what? She laughed. She actually laughed at me, said I was just another mark and not even a particularly smart one. Despite everything, Tori felt a flicker of sympathy for him. To be used so completely, to have your emotions manipulated so expertly, it was a special kind of cruelty. Where are you now? The Carlisle, but not with her. She checked out this morning. I don't know where she went. Maggie was frantically typing on her phone. She held up a message. Scarlett Kane boarded a flight to Prague an hour ago. She's gone, Rick. She got what she wanted and left. What am I supposed to do now? Fix it. Figure out how to get our money back. Cooperate with the CC and anyone else who wants to investigate, and leave me alone until you do. Tori hung up and immediately felt lighter. For the first time in 3 days, she could breathe without feeling like her chest was crushing inward. You okay? Maggie asked. No, but I will be. The baby kicked, and Tori smiled despite everything. We will be. As they walked out of the medical building into the crisp October air, Tori realized something had shifted. The devastating shock of discovery was fading into something more manageable. Not forgiveness, that might never come, but acceptance. Rick had made his choices. Now she had to make hers. And for the first time since she'd seen that photograph 3 days ago, she felt like she might actually survive this. That evening, Tori sat in the living room of her grandmother's house in Connecticut, surrounded by boxes of legal documents that Patricia Wells had couriered over. The house was a sanctuary from her childhood. White clapboard siding, wide front porch, rooms filled with antiques and the smell of lavender. Her grandmother had left it to her 5 years ago, and Tori had always thought she'd bring her own children here someday for summer vacations. She'd never imagined she'd be hiding here while her marriage imploded. Nina was in the kitchen making tea, her presence both comforting and practical. Her sister had always been the steady one, the one who saw through people's facades and wasn't afraid to say what needed saying. The financial forensics team found something interesting, Tori said, reading from one of Patricia's reports. The money Rick transferred didn't go to Scarlett's modeling agency. It went to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. Let me guess, owned by Volkov? Owned by a company owned by a company owned by Volkov. It's like financial Russian nesting dolls. Nina appeared with 2 cups of chamomile tea. How much of it can be recovered? Maybe half, if we're lucky. The rest is probably already laundered through so many accounts it'll never be traced. Tori's phone buzzed with another call from Rick. She'd been ignoring them all day. You don't have to talk to him, Nina said. I know, but avoiding him won't make this go away. She answered on the 3rd ring. What now, Rick? FBI agents are here, at the hotel. They want to talk to me about money laundering and international fraud. Good. Maybe they can explain to you what the rest of us figured out 3 days ago. Tori, I'm scared. The admission surprised her. Rick Hamilton didn't get scared. He got strategic or angry or coldly logical, but never scared. Of what? Of going to prison, of losing everything, of never getting to know our daughter. You should have thought about that before you transferred millions to a Russian criminal organization. I know. God, I know how stupid I was. But Tori, there's something else. Something the agents told me that you need to know. What? Volkov isn't just a money launderer. He's suspected of murder. 3 people who tried to expose his operations in the past 2 years have died in suspicious accidents. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Tori's anger. What are you saying? I'm saying that by getting involved with Scarlett, I may have put you and the baby in danger. Nina was listening to every word, her face growing pale. How much danger? The agents won't say, but they want to put us both in protective custody until they can determine the scope of the threat. Us? There is no us anymore, Rick. Tori, please. Whatever you think of me, whatever I've done to our marriage, I can't live with myself if something happens to you or the baby because of my mistakes. The baby chose that moment to kick hard against Tori's ribs, as if she was listening to the conversation and didn't like what she was hearing. I'll call you back. Tori hung up and immediately dialed Patricia Wells. Tori, what's wrong? How dangerous is Dmitry Volkov? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Dangerous enough that you should take the FBI's offer of protective custody seriously. You know about the offer? Agent Brooks called me an hour ago. They want to relocate you until they can assess the threat level. Tori looked around her grandmother's living room, at the family photos and comfortable furniture, and evidence of a life lived simply and safely. The idea of leaving this haven felt impossible. What would protective custody mean? Safe house, new identities temporarily, restricted contact with the outside world. It's not a small thing, Tori. For how long? Could be weeks, could be months. Depends on how quickly they can locate Volkov and determine whether he considers you a threat. The baby moved again, and Tori pressed her hand to the spot. 36 weeks pregnant, due in less than a month. The idea of giving birth in some sterile government safe house instead of the carefully planned birthing suite at Mount Sinai made her want to cry. What if I say no? Then you stay here, and we hope that Volkov considers this whole thing closed now that he has Rick's money. But you don't think he does. I think men like Volkov don't like loose ends, and I think Rick's cooperation with the FBI makes him a very dangerous loose end. Nina sat down beside Tori on the couch. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I never signed up for this. I never agreed to marry someone who would put our child in danger because he couldn't keep his pants zipped. So what do you want to do? Before Tori could answer, headlights swept across the front windows. A black SUV pulled into the driveway, followed by another. Expecting company? Nina asked. Tori wasn't. And in her current situation, unexpected visitors were not a good sign. The doorbell rang twice, followed by a firm knock. FBI Agent Brooks, Mrs. Hamilton, we need to talk. Nina looked at Tori. Decision time. Tori struggled to her feet, her hand braced against the small of her back. Every movement was an effort now, her body preparing for birth, while her world fell apart around her. Mrs. Hamilton, Agent Brooks called again. Tori walked to the front door and opened it to find a man who looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of an FBI agent. Square jaw, conservative suit, eyes that missed nothing. He was flanked by 2 other agents and looked like he hadn't slept in days. Agent Brooks, you're earlier than I expected. Ma'am, we have a situation. May we come in? Something in his tone made Tori's blood run cold. This wasn't a routine protective custody offer. This was an emergency. What kind of situation? The kind where we need to move you to a secure location immediately. Why? What's happened? Agent Brooks glanced at his companions before answering. Dmitry Volkov's private jet landed at Teterboro Airport 3 hours ago. He's in the United States, Mrs. Hamilton, and according to our intelligence, he's looking for you. The words hit Tori like a physical blow. She gripped the door frame to keep from falling. Looking for me? Why would he be looking for me? Because your husband's cooperation with our investigation has made you a liability. In Volkov's world, liabilities are eliminated. Nina appeared beside Tori, her face white with fear. What does that mean? It means we need to leave. Now. Tori looked back at the living room, at the boxes of legal documents and the tea Nina had made, and the comfortable sanctuary where she'd thought she could wait out the storm of her collapsing marriage. How long do I have to pack? 10 minutes, essential items only. As Tori climbed the stairs to gather clothes and medical records, she felt the baby moving restlessly inside her. This little person, who was supposed to be born into safety and love, was instead being rushed into hiding because of her father's catastrophic mistakes. But as she threw clothes into a suitcase, Tori realized something had changed. The paralyzing shock of the past few days had crystallized into something harder and more focused. Anger. Pure, clean, righteous anger at Rick for putting them in this position. At Scarlett for her lies and manipulation. At Volkov for making her fear for her unborn child's safety. And beneath the anger, something else was growing. Something that felt like strength. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a mother protecting her child, and that made her dangerous in ways none of them had anticipated. As she zipped the suitcase closed, Tori made herself a promise. When this was over, when Volkov was caught and Rick's mess was cleaned up and their daughter was born safely, she was going to build a life that no one could ever threaten again, a life where she was in control. The FBI safe house was a modest colonial in suburban Virginia, the kind of place that screamed federal budget rather than witness protection glamour. Beige walls, standard issue furniture, and windows that didn't open. Tori had been there for 6 days and she was going stir-crazy. Agent Brooks had become a regular presence, updating her on the investigation while trying to keep her calm. Today he sat across from her at the kitchen table, spreading surveillance photos like playing cards. We've traced Volkov's movements since he arrived, Brooks said. He went straight to the Carlisle Hotel, where your husband had been staying. Past tense? We moved Mr. Hamilton to protective custody as well. Different location. Good. The thought surprised Tori with its viciousness, but she was glad Rick was scared. He deserved to be scared. Did Volkov find him? No, but he left a message. Brooks slid a photograph across the table. Hotel stationery with a handwritten note in block letters. Mr. Hamilton owes me money. I collect my debts. Charming, Tori said. Very subtle. It gets better. He also left this. Another photo. A sonogram image. Not from Tori's medical file, but a generic one downloaded from the internet. The message was clear. We know about the baby. Tori's blood ran cold. She pressed her hand instinctively to her belly, where their daughter was running out of room and getting stronger every day. How did he get a sonogram? He didn't. It's a stock photo. But the implication is clear. That he's threatening my baby. That he wants us to think he's threatening your baby. There's a difference. Nina, who had insisted on staying with Tori despite the inconvenience, looked up from her laptop. What kind of difference? Volkov is a businessman, not a psychopath. Threatening pregnant women brings the kind of attention his operation can't afford. But making us think he might threaten you? That keeps the pressure on your husband to cooperate. So I'm just a pawn. You're leverage, which is why you're here instead of at home. Tori stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the small backyard, where 2 more agents pretended to be neighbors doing yard work. The October leaves were turning gold and red, and somewhere beyond the surveillance perimeter, normal people were living normal lives. How long does this go on? Until we locate Volkov and determine he's no longer a threat, or until he leaves the country. And if he doesn't leave? Brooks was quiet for a moment. Then we discuss more permanent relocation options. Permanent relocation. You mean witness protection. I mean keeping you and your daughter safe, whatever that takes. The baby kicked hard and Tori gasped. These weren't the gentle movements of early pregnancy anymore. At 37 weeks, their daughter was running out of room and making her displeasure known. Are you okay? Nina was on her feet immediately. Just tired, and tired of being tired. Tori sat back down carefully. I want to know everything about Scarlett Kane, not just the con artist version. Everything. Brooks hesitated. Why? Because she's the key to this whole thing. Volkov sent her to target Rick specifically. I want to know why. We've been investigating her background. I want to talk to her. That's not possible. She's in Prague, probably under Volkov's protection. Then find someone who knows her, someone who worked with her before she became a professional liar. Brooks exchanged a look with Nina. There might be someone, a photographer who worked with her in Cleveland before she moved to New York. He's been trying to cooperate with our investigation. Trying to? He's scared. Volkov's people have been asking questions about anyone who might know Scarlett's real identity. Bring him here. Tori, I'm not asking, I'm telling. This is my life, my daughter's life, and my husband's colossal stupidity that got us into this mess. I want answers, and I want them now. Something in her tone must have gotten through to Brooks, because he nodded slowly. I'll make some calls. Traffic you. 2 hours later, Marcus Webb sat in the safe house living room, fidgeting with a coffee cup and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He was maybe 30 years old, with the kind of carefully maintained stubble and vintage band t-shirt that screamed struggling artist. I only worked with Stephanie, that's what I knew her as, Stephanie Kowalski, for about 6 months, he said. This was 2 years ago when she first started modeling seriously. What was she like? Tori asked. Smart, ambitious, but also... Marcus paused, searching for words. There was something calculating about her, like she was always working an angle. Give me an example. She targeted older photographers, successful ones with connections. She'd date them just long enough to get introduced to their network, then move on to someone more useful. So the manipulation started early. Earlier than that, probably. She told me she'd been supporting herself since she was 16. Parents died in a car accident, no other family. She'd learned to survive by figuring out what people wanted and giving it to them. Tori felt an unexpected flicker of sympathy. To be orphaned so young, to have to make your own way in the world. It didn't excuse what Scarlett had done, but it explained some of it. When did she meet Volkov? About 8 months after I knew her. She started getting these expensive gifts, flying to Monaco and Switzerland for photo shoots that didn't seem to exist. I asked her about it once and she laughed it off. Said she'd met some foreign businessman who liked to spoil her. Did you know she married him? Marcus's eyes widened. Married? No. She always said marriage was for suckers who couldn't think past the next paycheck. Interesting. So even marriage to Volkov was just another business transaction. What happened to your friendship? It ended when I figured out she was playing me. I introduced her to a gallery owner I knew, thinking it might help her career. 2 weeks later, she was sleeping with him, and I was cut out completely. And now? Now I spend my days looking over my shoulder, wondering if Volkov's people are going to decide I know too much. Nina had been taking notes throughout the conversation. Marcus, did Stephanie ever mention wanting to target anyone specific? Any particular type of man? She was obsessed with tech moguls, said they were the new oil barons except stupider. She studied them like homework, their business practices, their weaknesses, their personal lives. Tori felt pieces clicking into place. She researched Rick specifically. I don't know names, but she definitely had a type. Older, successful, emotionally vulnerable. She said men going through midlife crises were the easiest marks because they wanted to feel young and powerful again. The description stung because it was so accurate. Rick at 45, watching his friends' children graduate from college, while he struggled with fertility treatments. The perfect target for a woman who made him feel virile and desired again. "There's something else," Marcus said hesitantly. "Something I probably should have mentioned to the FBI earlier." "What?" "Stephanie kept a journal, detailed notes on everyone she met, their weaknesses, how to manipulate them. She called it her insurance policy." Brooks leaned forward. "What kind of journal?" "Digital, encrypted files on a laptop she kept hidden in a safety deposit box. She showed it to me once when she'd been drinking. Said if anything ever happened to her, that journal would take down a lot of powerful people." "Where's the safety deposit box?" "Cleveland, First National Bank on Euclid Avenue. But I don't know the box number or how to access it." Tori looked at Brooks. "Can you get it?" "If it exists, and if we can get a warrant. But it'll take time." "How much time?" "Days, maybe weeks." The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Tori winced. 37 weeks meant she could go into labor at any moment. The idea of giving birth while Volkov was still hunting them made her stomach clench. "I don't have weeks," she said. "None of us do." As if summoned by her words, Brooks's phone rang. He answered on the second ring, his face growing grim as he listened. "When?" he said. "How many?" He hung up and looked at Tori with an expression that made her blood run cold. "What now?" "Volkov's people just raided your penthouse in Manhattan. They didn't find anything, but the message is clear." "What message?" "He's done being patient, and he's done pretending this is just about money." Outside, the October wind picked up, rattling the windows of the safe house. Tori pulled her sweater tighter around her shoulders and tried not to think about how small and vulnerable their daughter would be when she was born. But beneath the fear, that new feeling was growing stronger. Anger, pure and clean and focused. Volkov had made this personal, and he had no idea what he'd unleashed. That night, alone in the sterile bedroom of the safe house, Tori sat in the dark and tried to make sense of her life. 37 weeks pregnant, hiding from Russian criminals, married to a man who'd destroyed their family for a woman who'd never existed. The baby moved restlessly, responding to Tori's stress. She pressed her hand to the spot where a tiny foot or elbow poked against her ribs. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered. "This isn't what I planned for you." Her phone rang, Rick's name on the screen. She'd been ignoring his calls for days, but tonight felt different. Tonight she needed to hear him admit what he'd done. "What do you want, Rick?" "To apologize. To explain." His voice sounded hollow, older. "Tori, I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go? Just emotional cheating? Just financial fraud? Help me understand the acceptable level of betrayal." Silence stretched between them. In the background, Tori could hear the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of television. Another safe house. Another prison of Rick's making. "The FBI says Volkov killed a man in Prague last week," Rick said finally. "Someone who'd been cooperating with Interpol's investigation into his money laundering operation." Tori's blood turned to ice. "Killed how?" "Car accident, made to look accidental, but they have surveillance footage of Volkov's people tampering with the brakes." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need you to understand how dangerous this situation is. How sorry I am that my stupidity put you and the baby at risk." "Sorry doesn't fix this, Rick." "I know, but maybe cooperation can. The FBI wants me to help them build a case against Volkov. Financial records, recordings of conversations with Scarlett, anything that might help them arrest him." "And you're going to do it?" "What choice do I have? If I don't cooperate, he'll never stop hunting us. And if something happens to you or the baby because of my mistakes..." His voice broke. In 15 years of marriage, Tori had seen Rick cry exactly twice. When his father died, and when she miscarried their first pregnancy 3 years ago. Hearing him break down now should have made her feel something. Sympathy maybe, or shared grief for what they'd lost. Instead, she felt nothing. "Where's all your money now, Rick? The $18 million you gave to Scarlett?" "Gone. transferred through so many shell companies that the FBI says it'll never be recovered. And the 50 million you were planning to give her? Frozen by the SEC. We can't touch any of our major assets until the investigation is complete. Our assets? You mean your assets? Tori, please. No, Rick. There is no our anymore. You made that choice when you decided a con artist was worth more than your pregnant wife. The baby kicked hard, and Tori gasped as sharp pain radiated across her belly. She'd been having these episodes all day. Not contractions exactly, but something that felt like warning shots. Tori, are you okay? She hung up without answering. The pain intensified, a tight band around her middle that took her breath away. Too early. The baby wasn't due for 3 more weeks, but stress could trigger premature labor. Dr. Mitchell had warned her about this. Tori made her way carefully to the living room, where Nina was reading on the couch. I need to call Dr. Mitchell, Tori said. Nina was on her feet immediately. What's wrong? I don't know, maybe nothing, but something feels different. Nina called Agent Brooks while Tori dialed Dr. Mitchell's emergency line. At 9 p.m., she got an answering service, but they promised to have the doctor call back within minutes. Mrs. Hamilton? Dr. Mitchell's familiar voice was a comfort even through the phone. What's happening? Pain, pressure. The baby's been moving a lot, and I've been having these episodes where my whole belly gets tight. How far apart? Tori looked at the clock, trying to remember when the last episode had started. Maybe 20 minutes. But they're not regular. Sounds like Braxton Hicks contractions. False labor brought on by stress. Are you able to stay calm? Tori almost laughed. Calm, while hiding from Russian killers and processing her husband's betrayal. I'm trying. I know this is a difficult situation, but stress really can trigger premature labor. Try to rest, drink water, and call me if the contractions become regular or if your water breaks. After she hung up, Tori sank back into the couch cushions. False labor. Her body's way of practicing for the real thing while her world fell apart. You okay? Nina asked. No, but the baby's okay, which is what matters. Want to talk about it? Tori considered the question. For days, she'd been focused on the immediate crisis, Volkov's threats, the FBI investigation, the practical matters of hiding and waiting. She hadn't really processed the emotional devastation of Rick's betrayal. I keep thinking about the signs I missed, she said finally. The late nights he blamed on work, the business trips that seemed to happen more frequently, the way he stopped touching me unless it was for fertility purposes. You were focused on getting pregnant. That's not your fault. But I knew something was wrong. Deep down I knew. And I chose to ignore it because I was so desperate to have a baby that I was willing to pretend everything was fine. That doesn't make you responsible for his choices, doesn't it? If I'd confronted him 6 months ago, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe he never would have been vulnerable to Scarlett's manipulation. Nina sat down beside her. Or maybe he would have left you then instead of now, and you'd be dealing with all of this while going through a divorce and fighting for custody. The thought was surprisingly comforting, at least now with Rick under federal investigation and their marriage clearly over. Tori didn't have to pretend anymore. She didn't have to smile through dinner parties where everyone asked about their fertility treatments. She didn't have to make excuses for Rick's absence from prenatal appointments. She didn't have to keep hoping that a baby would somehow fix what was broken between them. I think I'm relieved, she said, surprised by the admission. Relieved? That it's over. That I don't have to keep trying to save something that was already dead. The baby moved again, a gentler roll this time rather than a sharp kick, as if she'd been listening to the conversation and approved of her mother's honesty. What are you going to do? After all this is over? Tori looked around the safe house living room. Generic furniture, beige walls, no personality or warmth. It was like a metaphor for her marriage. Functional but empty, providing shelter without any real comfort. Build something new, Something that's mine. What does that look like? I don't know yet, but I know what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like waiting for someone else to make me happy. It doesn't look like ignoring my instincts to avoid conflict. It doesn't look like accepting less than I deserve because I'm afraid of being alone. Another pain hit, but this one felt different, stronger, more purposeful. Nina, Tori said carefully, I think you should call Agent Brooks. Why? Because I think this baby has decided she's done waiting for her father to fix his mistakes. As Nina reached for her phone, Tori felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. Whatever came next, labor, Volkov's threats, the aftermath of Rick's betrayal, she would handle it. Not as half of a broken marriage, but as herself. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. The contractions turned out to be false labor after all, but the scare had been enough to make Agent Brooks request a medical evaluation, which was how Tori found herself at George Washington University Hospital at 10 p.m., being examined by a doctor who looked like he was barely old enough to drive. Everything looks normal, Dr. Patterson said, checking the fetal monitor. Baby's heart rate is perfect, cervix is still closed, but you're at 37 weeks, which means she could decide to make her appearance anytime. Define anytime. Tonight, next week, 3 weeks from now. Babies have their own schedules. As if to prove his point, their daughter chose that moment to deliver a particularly strong kick that made the monitor spike. She's active, Dr. Patterson observed. She's been like this for days. I think she's responding to stress. Yours or hers? Both, probably. The doctor made notes on Tori's chart. I'm going to recommend modified bed rest until this situation resolves. No unnecessary stress, plenty of fluids, and call immediately if contractions become regular. Back at the safe house, Tori was settling into bed when Agent Brooks knocked on her door. Mrs. Hamilton, there's someone here who wants to talk to you. At 11 p.m.? She insisted. Says she has information about Scarlett Kane that could help the investigation. Tori struggled back into her robe and made her way to the living room, where a young woman sat nervously on the couch. She was maybe 24, with blonde hair and the kind of polished appearance that screamed expensive maintenance. Everything about her looked familiar. Mrs. Hamilton, I'm Ashley Morrison. I used to work with Stephanie, Scarlett, in New York. Work with her how? I was her roommate, and sometimes her partner. Brooks looked up from his notes. Partner in what? In the cons, the targeting of wealthy men. I was her backup plan. Tori sat down carefully, her hand braced against her lower back. Explain that. Ashley twisted her hands in her lap. Stephanie would identify targets and make initial contact, but if things went wrong, if a mark got suspicious or violent, I would step in, create a distraction, provide an alibi, sometimes even seduce a different target to confuse the situation. And you came forward now because Dmitry Volkov is looking for anyone who worked with Stephanie. My name was in her apartment when the FBI raided it. I figure I'm probably next on his list. Brooks leaned forward. What can you tell us about Volkov's operation? More than you want to know. Stephanie kept detailed records of everything. Every mark, every con, every dollar they stole. She was planning to use it as leverage if Volkov ever tried to cut her out. Where are these records? That's the thing. She never told me exactly where she kept them, but I know they exist. She used to joke about having enough information to destroy half the billionaires in America. Tori felt a chill. What kind of information? Financial records, personal secrets, evidence of other illegal activities she discovered while gaining access to their accounts. Stephanie wasn't just stealing money, she was collecting blackmail material. On my husband? Ashley nodded reluctantly. Mr. Hamilton was supposed to be the biggest score yet, not just because of his money, but because of his business connections. Stephanie spent months researching his company, his associates, his government contracts. Government contracts? Hamilton Technologies has deals with the Department of Defense, cybersecurity systems, encrypted communications, things that would be very valuable to foreign governments. Brooks was taking rapid notes. Are you saying Volkov was using Scarlett to gain access to classified information? I'm saying Stephanie was way over her head with this one. She thought she was just running a romance con for money. She didn't realize Volkov was planning to use her access to Rick's systems for espionage. The baby kicked hard and Tori gasped. The implications were staggering. Rick hadn't just been manipulated into giving away their money, he'd potentially compromised national security. How much did Scarlett know about the espionage angle? At first, nothing, but she figured it out when Volkov started asking specific questions about Mr. Hamilton's work. That's when she decided to disappear. She's hiding from Volkov? She's terrified of him. The romance con was supposed to be clean, steal some money and move on. But once espionage got involved, people started dying. Tori thought about the photographer Marcus Webb, how scared he'd looked just talking about Scarlett. How many other people were hiding from Volkov's reach? Where do you think she is now? Honestly, I think she's trying to get to that safety deposit box in Cleveland. If she can retrieve her insurance files, she might have enough leverage to negotiate her way out of this. Brooks stood up. We need to get to Cleveland first. Already on it, Ashley said. I know which bank, and I think I know how to access the box. How? Stephanie used my social security number for the account. She said it was safer to have it in someone else's name. Someone Volkov would never think to investigate. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. You're willing to cooperate with us? Brooks asked. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stop Volkov before he kills me, and before he decides that Mrs. Hamilton and her baby are too dangerous to leave alive. Tori felt the maybe move again, a gentle roll this time. Their daughter was running out of room in there, preparing for a world that was far more complicated and dangerous than any child should have to face. What do you need from me? Tori asked. Nothing, Brooks said immediately. You stay here, stay safe, and let us handle this. That's not going to work. Mrs. Hamilton, no, this started with my husband's stupidity, but it's become about my family's safety. I'm not sitting on the sidelines anymore. Nina looked alarmed. Tori, you're 37 weeks pregnant, which means I'm motivated to end this quickly. Tori struggled to her feet. What's the plan? Ashley looked between Tori and Brooks uncertainly. We go to Cleveland, access the safety deposit box, and hope Stephanie's files contain enough evidence to bring down Volkov's entire operation. And if they don't, then we're all in a lot more trouble than we thought. The baby kicked again, and this time Tori smiled. Their daughter was strong, active, ready to fight her way into the world. Maybe it was time for her mother to show the same determination. When do we leave? We? Brooks shook his head. Mrs. Hamilton, you're not going anywhere near Cleveland. Then you're not getting access to that safety deposit box, because I'm the only one with the motivation to see this through. Brooks looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Tori's expression stopped him. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows. But inside the safe house, for the first time in days, Tori felt like they had a plan. A dangerous plan, but better than hiding and waiting for Volkov to find them. She was done being a victim. It was time to fight back. The flight to Cleveland took 2 hours, but to Tori it felt like an eternity. 37 weeks pregnant, strapped into a government plane with Ashley Morrison and Agent Brooks, flying toward what might be their only chance to stop Volkov. You sure you're okay? Nina asked for the 10th time. Tori shifted in her seat, trying to find a comfortable position. I'm pregnant, not dying, and this baby isn't going anywhere until we finish this. Ashley looked nervous, picking at her manicured nails. What if the files aren't there? What if Stephanie moved them? Then we figure out what comes next, Tori said. But we don't assume failure before we try. Agent Brooks was on his phone with the Cleveland field office, coordinating security for their arrival. The plan was simple. Get to the bank, access the safety deposit box, and hope Scarlett's insurance files contained enough evidence to destroy Volkov's operation. Simple plans, Tori had learned, were usually anything but. The plane touched down at Burke Lakefront Airport just after noon. 2 black SUVs waited on the tarmac, along with 4 more FBI agents who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Mrs. Hamilton, Agent Torres introduced himself. Cleveland field office. We've secured the bank and cleared the surrounding area. Any sign of Volkov's people? Not yet, but we're operating under the assumption they're watching. The drive to First National Bank took 20 minutes through downtown Cleveland. Tori stared out the window at the ordinary city streets, wondering how many other people were going about their normal Tuesday afternoon without knowing that Russian criminals were potentially lurking in their neighborhood. The bank was a solid limestone building from the 1920s, the kind of place that projected old-fashioned stability and discretion. Perfect for hiding secrets. Inside, the manager, a nervous man named Peterson, led them to the safety deposit box area. Ashley signed the necessary paperwork with hands that shook slightly. "Box number 473, Peterson said, inserting his key. "Ms. Morrison will need to use her key as well." Ashley produced a small silver key from her purse. "Stephanie gave this to me 6 months ago. Said if anything ever happened to her, I should get the box and disappear." "But you didn't." "I thought she was being paranoid. I thought the whole thing with Volkov was just another con that got a little complicated." The box slid out of the wall with a metallic scrape. Inside was a laptop, several flash drives, and a thick manila envelope. "That's it," Ashley breathed. "That's her insurance policy." Agent Brooks carefully photographed everything before removing it from the box. The laptop was password protected, but the flash drives were labeled Hamilton, Morrison, Blackwood, Chen. "4 different targets," Brooks observed. "4 that we know about," Ashley corrected. "There might be more." Tori felt the baby kick as Brooks inserted the flash drive, labeled Hamilton, into a government laptop. Files cascaded across the screen, financial records, email transcripts, even audio recordings. "She recorded everything," Tori whispered. Stephanie was thorough. She said rich men always underestimated beautiful women, so they said things around her they'd never say to a business partner. One of the audio files was labeled Rick July 15 Yacht. Brooks clicked on it, and Rick's voice filled the small room. "The DoD contract is worth $300 million over 5 years. Encrypted communications for overseas operations. It's the kind of thing that could make or break Hamilton Technologies." Scarlett's voice responded, honey-sweet and interested. "That sounds incredible. How do you manage security for something that's sensitive?" "Multiple layers of encryption, isolated servers, biometric access controls. We're essentially building a private internet for military communications." Tori felt sick. Rick had been discussing classified contracts with a Russian operative, and he'd been too infatuated to realize the danger. "There's more," Ashley said quietly, pointing to another file. "Financial records showing money transfers from Hamilton Technologies to Volkov's shell companies. Rick wasn't just giving Stephanie his personal money. He was funneling company funds through fake consulting contracts. The implications were staggering. Corporate espionage, money laundering, and potentially treason. Rick hadn't just destroyed their marriage. He destroyed his company and possibly compromised national security. Brooks was already on his phone, calling Washington. "We need a full counterintelligence team. This is bigger than money laundering." "Ah." The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Tori gasped. Sharp pain radiated across her belly, different from the false labor she'd experienced before. "Tori!" Nina was immediately at her side. "I'm okay. Just, the baby's really active today." But as another pain hit, Tori realized this might not be stress or false labor. This might be the real thing. "Agent Brooks," she said carefully, "how long before we can get back to Washington?" "Couple hours. Why?" "Because I think this baby has decided she's done waiting for us to finish cleaning up her father's mess." The pain intensified, and Tori gripped the edge of the table. Definitely contractions, and they were getting stronger. "Hospital," Nina said immediately. "We need to get to a hospital." "Mrs. Hamilton," Agent Torres looked alarmed. "Is this normal?" "Define normal." "I'm 37 weeks pregnant. We just discovered my husband is potentially guilty of treason, and I'm standing in a bank vault holding evidence that could start an international incident. Nothing about this is normal." But as another contraction hit, Tori realized something had shifted. The fear and uncertainty that had dominated her thoughts for weeks was crystallizing into something else. Determination. This baby was coming whether they were ready or not. Volkov's threats, Rick's betrayal, the FBI investigation. None of it mattered compared to the fact that her daughter had decided it was time to enter the world. Cleveland Clinic is 10 minutes away, Agent Torres said, already coordinating with his team. As they helped Tori to the SUV, she looked back at the bank where Scarlett's files were being secured. Evidence that would probably send Rick to prison. Evidence that would destroy what was left of their life together. But also evidence that would stop Volkov and keep their daughter safe. The baby kicked again, and Tori smiled despite the pain. "Hold on, little one," she whispered. "Let's finish this first." Cleveland Clinic's maternity ward was a controlled chaos of nurses, doctors, and medical equipment that should have been reassuring, but mostly just highlighted how far from home they were. Tori lay in a hospital bed, connected to monitors that tracked both her contractions and the baby's heart rate, while FBI agents coordinated security in the hallway outside. 4 centimeters dilated, Dr. Chen announced after examining her. "This baby is definitely coming, but you've got several hours yet." Several hours. Time for Volkov to track them down. Time for Rick to make even more catastrophic decisions. Time for everything to go wrong. "How long does labor usually take?" Agent Brooks asked from his position by the window. "For first babies, anywhere from 12 to 20 hours, Dr. Chen replied. "But every birth is different. 12 to 20 hours. Tori closed her eyes and tried to focus on breathing through the next contraction. Nina sat beside the bed, holding Tori's hand. "You're doing great. I'm giving birth in a Cleveland hospital while hiding from Russian killers. I don't think great covers it." Brooks's phone buzzed with an update from Washington. His expression grew grim as he read. "What now?" Tori asked. "Good news and bad news. Good news, the files from Scarlett's safety deposit box contain enough evidence to indict Volkov and several of his associates. Bad news, Volkov knows we have them." "How?" "Ashley Morrison wasn't as innocent as she claimed. She's been feeding information to Volkov's people for months." Tori felt another contraction building, but this pain was different, sharper, more personal. "She played us. She played everyone, including Scarlett, apparently. The recordings show that Ashley was supposed to eliminate Scarlett once the Hamilton con was complete." "Eliminate how?" "Permanently." The contraction peaked, and Tori gripped Nina's hand hard enough to leave marks. When it passed, she found her voice again. "Where is Ashley now?" "Gone. Slipped away from our people at the airport. But Mrs. Hamilton, there's something else. Something you need to know before this baby arrives." Tori braced herself. After everything they discovered, she wasn't sure she could handle another revelation. "Your husband isn't just guilty of money laundering and corporate espionage. He's been cooperating with Volkov's people for months, providing them with classified information in exchange for protection from prosecution." The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not possible." The financial records show payments from Volkov's organization to Rick's personal accounts, dating back 8 months. He wasn't a victim of the con, he was a willing participant. Tori stared at the ceiling, processing this final betrayal. Rick hadn't just been seduced by a beautiful woman, he'd actively betrayed his country, his company, and his family for money. How much money? $50 million transferred over 6 months through various shell companies. Another contraction hit, stronger than before. But beneath the physical pain, Tori felt something else building. Not fear or despair, but a cold, clean anger that burned away everything except clarity. "Agent Brooks," she said when the contraction passed, "I want to talk to my husband." "Mrs. Hamilton, you're in labor. I want to talk to him now, before this baby is born, before I have to figure out how to explain to my daughter that her father is a traitor." Brooks hesitated, then nodded. "I'll set up a video call." 5 minutes later, Rick's face appeared on the laptop screen. He looked haggard, older, his silver hair unkempt and his eyes red-rimmed. Behind him, Tori could see the sterile walls of what was obviously another government facility. "Tori, are you okay? Brooks said you're in labor." "I'm in labor in a Cleveland hospital because your Russian friends are trying to kill me. So no, Rick, I'm not okay." A contraction built, and Tori breathed through it while staring at her husband's face on the screen. When it passed, she continued, I know about the $50 million. Rick's face went white. Tori, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been selling classified information to foreign criminals? That you weren't just an unfaithful husband but an actual traitor? It's not what it looks like. It looks like you sold out your country for money while your pregnant wife attended doctor's appointments alone. What part am I misunderstanding? Rick's shoulders sagged. For the first time in 15 years of marriage, Tori saw him look completely defeated. It started as insurance, he said quietly. When the Scarlet thing began, I realized I might need protection if it went bad. Volkov offered to make some of my legal problems disappear in exchange for information. What legal problems? Hamilton Technologies has been under SEC investigation for 6 months. Accounting irregularities, inflated stock prices, misrepresented earnings. If it came out, the company would have collapsed. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. So you decided to commit treason instead of facing bankruptcy. I was trying to protect us, our future, the baby's future. You were protecting yourself. Tori's voice was steady despite the pain building in her lower back. And you destroyed everything in the process. Dr. Chen appeared at her bedside, checking the monitors. How are the contractions? Getting stronger. How much longer? You're at 6 centimeters, moving faster now. Maybe 4 more hours. 4 hours? Time for this conversation to end and for Tori to focus on bringing their daughter into a world that Rick had made infinitely more complicated. Rick, she said, looking back at the screen, I want you to listen very carefully. Tori, please. Our daughter is going to be born in the next few hours. When she is, I don't want you anywhere near her until this mess is completely resolved. You can't keep me from my child. I can and I will. You're under federal investigation for treason, espionage, and money laundering. You're not exactly father of the year material. I love you, both of you. Everything I did was to protect our family. No, Rick, everything you did was to protect yourself. If you'd loved us, you never would have put us in danger. The pain was intensifying, but Tori felt clearer than she had in months, maybe years. When this baby is born, she's going to have my name. Cooper, not Hamilton. Tori, Grace Eleanor Cooper. That's her name. She doesn't get to carry the name of a traitor. Brooks appeared in the frame beside Rick. Mrs. Hamilton, we need to wrap this up. There's been a development. What kind of development? Volkov's people have been spotted in Cleveland. We need to move you to a more secure location. I'm in labor. I can't exactly relocate right now. Then we secure this floor and hope for the best. Another contraction hit, stronger than any before. Tori gripped the bed rails and breathed through it, focusing on the knowledge that each pain brought her closer to meeting her daughter. Rick, she said when she could speak again, I want you to know something. What? I forgive you. His face crumpled with relief. But I'll never trust you again, and I'll never let you hurt our daughter the way you hurt me. She nodded to Brooks, who ended the video call. Rick's face disappeared, leaving only the blank screen and the sound of medical equipment monitoring Tori's progress toward motherhood. You okay? Nina asked. No, but I will be. Dr. Chen checked her progress again. 8 centimeters. This baby's in a hurry. Good, so am I. Outside the hospital room, Tori could hear FBI agents coordinating security measures. Radio chatter, footsteps, the controlled urgency of professionals dealing with a threat. But inside the room, despite everything, there was a strange sense of peace. The baby was coming, whatever else happened, whether Volkov was caught, whether Rick went to prison, whether their marriage could somehow be salvaged, their daughter would be born, and she would be safe. Mrs. Cooper? Dr. Chen said, and it took Tori a moment to realize he was talking to her. My name is still Hamilton, for now. Mrs. Hamilton, then. We're going to need to move you to the delivery room soon. Tori nodded and closed her eyes, focusing on the strength building in her body. The same strength that had gotten her through fertility treatments and pregnancy complications and the discovery of Rick's betrayal. She was going to need that strength for what came next. Raising a daughter alone, rebuilding her life from scratch, learning to trust herself again. But first, she had a baby to deliver. And despite everything else that was falling apart, that felt exactly right. Grace Eleanor Cooper was born at 3:47 a.m. on October 23rd, weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces, with dark hair like her mother's and her father's stubborn chin. She entered the world screaming, as if she had strong opinions about the circumstances of her birth and wasn't afraid to voice them. "She's perfect," Dr. Chen said, placing the baby on Tori's chest. Tori looked down at her daughter, this tiny person who had fought her way into existence despite Russian oligarchs and federal investigations, and a father who'd betrayed everything he'd claimed to value. Grace opened her eyes, dark blue and alert, and seemed to take in her mother's face with serious consideration. "Hello, baby girl," Tori whispered. "You're safe now." Nina was crying. Agent Brooks, who had maintained professional composure through money laundering investigations and international espionage, looked suspiciously emotional as he watched the new mother and daughter. "Any word on Volkov?" Tori asked, not taking her eyes off Grace. "Arrested 2 hours ago in Detroit. Turns out Ashley Morrison really was working for us. She was an undercover FBI agent who'd been tracking Volkov's organization for 18 months. Tori looked up sharply. "What?" "She led Volkov straight into a trap. All those files from Scarlett's safety deposit box? They contained enough evidence to indict his entire organization. And Scarlett? Also arrested. She was trying to board a plane to Moscow when they picked her up." Grace made a soft sound, and Tori's attention returned completely to her daughter. Amazing how the rest of the world could fade away when you were looking at your child for the first time. "What happens now?" Nina asked. "Now we go home," Tori said. "Grace and I have a life to build." 3 months later, Tori sat in the garden of her grandmother's house in Connecticut, watching Grace sleep in her carrier. The October trees were bare now, November frost covering the lawn, but the house felt more like home than the Manhattan penthouse ever had. The federal investigation had concluded with Rick's cooperation. He'd pleaded guilty to money laundering and corporate espionage, receiving a sentence of 6 months in minimum security prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Hamilton Technologies had collapsed, its government contracts revoked, and its stock worthless. But the evidence he'd provided had helped the FBI dismantle Volkov's entire network. Dmitry Volkov himself was awaiting trial in federal prison, facing charges that would keep him locked up for the rest of his life. Scarlett Kane, real name Stephanie Kowalski, had testified against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. She'd serve 3 years, then disappear into witness protection. The divorce had been finalized last week. Tori kept the Connecticut house, half of what remained of their assets after legal fees and government seizures, and full custody of Grace with supervised visitation rights for Rick. He'd been released from prison yesterday. Maggie Cooper approached across the lawn carrying 2 cups of coffee and her laptop. She'd spent the past 3 months working on an investigative series about Russian influence operations in American businesses. The Hamilton case had become the centerpiece of her reporting. "How's the interview going?" Maggie asked, nodding toward the woman sitting at the patio table. Sarah Phillips from Forbes was working on a feature about women who rebuild after public scandals. She'd been asking questions for the past hour about resilience and reinvention and what comes after your life implodes in the national media. "Mrs. Hamilton, what would you say to women going through similar situations?" Tori considered the question while Grace stirred in her carrier, made soft baby sounds, and settled back into sleep. "I'd say the hardest part isn't the betrayal. It's realizing you participated in your own deception, that you ignored signs, made excuses, chose to believe convenient lies because the truth was too painful to face. Do you regret trusting your husband?" "I regret not trusting myself. I knew something was wrong months before I saw that first photograph, but I was so focused on getting pregnant, on saving our marriage through a baby, that I didn't listen to my own instincts." "What's next for you and Grace?" Tori looked down at her daughter, now awake and alert, taking in the world with curious dark eyes. Grace and I are building something new. I'm starting a foundation that provides legal support for women whose assets are frozen during federal investigations. Turns out there are more of us than you'd think. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Questions about forgiveness. Complicated. About whether she'd take Rick back. Absolutely not. About whether she thought their marriage could have been saved. Not by a baby, which had been her mistake. After the reporter left, Maggie settled into the garden chair. How do you really feel about Rick coming to visit tomorrow? Nervous, but not about him. About Grace missing out on having a father who's actually present. He's been requesting visits every week since he got out. Prison has a way of clarifying priorities. Rick arrived the next morning with flowers for Tori, still apologizing, and a mobile for Grace's room, trying to be useful. He looked different, thinner, older, but also somehow more solid, less polished. The Silver Fox charm had been replaced by something more genuine, though Tori wasn't sure she trusted it. "How was your week?" she asked, a question that would have been automatic during their marriage but felt strange now. "Good. I started working with a nonprofit that helps white-collar convicts reintegrate into society. Turns out there are skills from the business world that translate to helping people rebuild their lives." Ironic career choice. Informed career choice. He settled into the chair beside Grace's carrier, talking to his daughter in the soft voice Tori had never heard him use with adults. Grace responded with coos and hand movements, already recognizing her father's voice despite their limited contact. She's growing so fast. Every day something new. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter discover her own hands. The anger that had consumed Tori for months had settled into something more manageable. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. "I saw the Forbes article announcement," Rick said. "I'm proud of you." "Don't. Don't what?" "Don't try to take credit for my success by association. I'm not rebuilding because of you. I'm rebuilding despite you." He nodded, chastened. "You're right. I just meant you're going to help a lot of people." Grace started fussing, and Tori lifted her, settling her against her shoulder. The baby quieted immediately, content in her mother's arms. "She's lucky to have you," Rick said quietly. "She's lucky to have me learning to trust myself again." As Rick left that afternoon, Tori didn't watch from the window. Instead, she focused on Grace, on the foundation paperwork spread across the kitchen table, on the life they were building together. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. "Dinner tomorrow? I have news about a story I'm working on. Corporate fraud in the pharmaceutical industry. Might be perfect for the foundation." Tori typed back, "Yes, Grace and I will be there." She looked down at her daughter, now sleeping peacefully in her arms. "What do you think, baby girl? Ready to help save the world?" Grace opened one eye, as if considering the question, then settled back into sleep. Tori took that as a yes. 6 months later, the Cooper Foundation had helped 43 women navigate federal investigations that had frozen their assets. Tori's story had become a case study in rebuilding after betrayal, and requests for interviews came weekly. But the real victory was smaller and more personal. It was Grace's first smile, her first laugh, the way she reached for her mother when she was scared or tired. It was the life they'd built in the Connecticut house, simple and quiet and completely their own. Rick visited every Sunday, and slowly, carefully, he was building a relationship with his daughter. Not the relationship of a traditional family, but something new and honest and based on the reality of who they all were now. The foundation office was in the renovated barn behind the house, and Tori often worked with Grace sleeping in a carrier beside her desk. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was better than the life she'd lost. More real, more hers. On a warm spring afternoon, as she watched Grace try to crawl across the living room carpet, Tori's phone rang, unknown number. "This is Tori Cooper." "Mrs. Cooper? This is Jennifer Gates. I read about your foundation in Forbes, and I'd like to discuss a rather substantial donation." The call lasted an hour. By the end of it, the Cooper Foundation would be able to help thousands of women instead of dozens. After she hung up, Tori sat on the floor beside Grace, who had managed to army crawl her way to a stuffed elephant and was now trying to eat its ear. Big news, baby girl. We're going to be able to help a lot more people. Grace looked up at her mother with bright, intelligent eyes and babbled something that sounded remarkably like agreement. Tori had learned to trust herself again. She'd learned that losing everything sometimes meant gaining yourself. And she'd learned that the strongest thing you could do wasn't always fighting back. Sometimes it was letting go. "Come on," she said, scooping Grace up. "Let's go make dinner. We have a lot of work to do." As they walked to the kitchen, Tori felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Complete contentment with her life exactly as it was. Not perfect, not planned, but entirely, authentically hers. And for Grace Eleanor Cooper and her mother, that was more than enough. It was everything. If this story of betrayal, resilience, and the strength of a mother protecting her child resonated with you, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you think Victoria should have done differently. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's possible to rebuild after everything falls apart. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.